Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. This is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and today I'm going to be doing a different type of video. This is a video I have never really have done here on my channel. I've never really talked about it. I'm just going to try to get comfortable here. So I want everybody to get comfortable. I feel like when you've gone through a journey that I have gone through, it's not easy to discuss a lot of personal things that you've been through in your life. I was someone that never really spoke about this, but I can speak about it now because I feel like I'm very healed, and maybe it can serve as an inspiration to those of you that are parents out there that have children that are in school or were in school, since we are going through a pandemic. But maybe once school resumes, and parents watch this video, that it can offer some type of inspiration to those of you that are listening to this. So this is me confronting my bullies. Now I know that I don't have my bullies from elementary, junior high, and high school here in front of me, but I wanted to talk about a lot of the stuff that I went through, that I know that a lot of you that have children out there are going through, or perhaps you are a viewer, a ray of light on my channel, and you probably have gone through the same thing at some given time in your lifetime, and you can probably relate. Now, growing up, I was in a family that was a single parent family, basically my mom, and she did the best that she could to raise me to be a very productive and good soul here in the world. And so I owe a lot of it to her, and I'm very grateful that I am who I am today. However, the journey here to where I am right now has been a very difficult one, and this is not about me throwing a pity party for myself or really focusing on the negatives, but I know that a lot of the people that did bully me are probably watching me now and watching the success that I've had. And I say that very humbly, because I don't feel like I'm a very famous celebrity or someone that is at the stratospheres like actors or actresses or musicians, but I am someone that I feel comfortable enough in my skin and who I am to talk about this so openly and to the camera. So I'm not even flinching. I'm trying to get better when I'm looking at a camera and filming videos. I know that has nothing to do with this. So to let you know, I was always different as a little child, and I knew that. I was so introverted, but being a starseed, being, spiritual in nature, I didn't feel like I could vibe with a lot of the children. And so the only time that I really immersed myself with other kids was in elementary, when we would have recess after lunch. We would typically go outside to the playground and have recess, and I had maybe about 2 friends. There were 2 little girls that were my friends during elementary, and I went to a Montessori school. So if you're not familiar with that kind of the way it's structured, it's very different than a regular public school. There are a lot of different values, and there's a lot more personal time with the teachers in the classroom. The setup's a lot different. And so throughout my high school, throughout my elementary, this is where it all started. God, it feels like I'm having a therapist session with all of you, my rays of light. I encountered a lot of vicious bullies, a lot of kids. These were typically other little boys that were just very spiteful. I had everything done to me that you typically would experience in bullying, being pushed, being hit in the chest, socked in the chest, and at the time, this was in circa, I feel old, 1988 through 1993, about that time I was in elementary, of those years, kind of in that range. And so back then, zero tolerance wasn't something that actually had passed until maybe about 1993. Then we had a zero tolerance policy in our elementary, basically meaning that they would not tolerate any fighting or anything that went against the school district's rules, etc., and you would be expelled from school if you got caught fighting, or your parents would get fined. And so my mom always told me never to fight. She raised me to walk away, turn the other cheek. And so I know a lot of parents that are listening to that kind of like, well, you know, my kid's not going to be bullied. I'm going to tell them to fight back, yada, yada, yada. The thing here is that if you are a parent, stop making excuses for your children. I know that a lot of people may be listening to this and they may find this kind of like, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of abrasive, or me being very bold to say that. But in reality, I want you to stop making excuses for your child, because the reality is that your child is not perfect. Okay, and I'm telling you this from my own perspective. I was not the perfect child, but I was never looking for drama or looking for fights or looking for that kind of treatment that I received from a lot of these little hoodlums, these babies kids that were, you know, just awful. They were awful. I had, you know, my mom was called names. I was called names. I was called, you know, gay, faggot, fat, nerd, fat ass. I got all of that. And I never was typically like the perfect little thin little boy. You know, I always was a little pudgy. And I always had, you know, a little bit of weight on me. But that is kind of like what I endured. I remember like sitting there in the playground sometimes and not having like anybody to play with, and I would just look at the kids, you know, from a distance, and felt so alone. And I would, like, sometimes when we would have recess or we would have PE, physical education, I would just walk by myself instead of the other kids that would run together or walk together. I actually was very much a loner, and I think that kind of defined me, and I didn't really know what it was to have friendships, and felt kind of weird because of the fact that I didn't grow up with other children in my household. It was just me, and I really didn't have a lot of friends. So I never really got to experience a lot of things that other children get to experience, like going to birthday parties, having sleepovers. I never had the chance of anybody, you know, really offering me or inviting me in, you know, to have that. I did have one little black girl that was my like soul sister, and I remember that we did have a birthday party, and I actually invited her over, and that was like the only time that I actually got to experience a birthday party, and it was really, really great experience. But for the most part, I was always like in the books and always focusing on that. My junior high year, from 6th to 8th grade, I was in junior high, and I think that's when the bullying kind of ramped up and things were a little bit more apparent. I think when we start entering our teen years, it affects us on a more psychological level or a spiritual level, and I feel like these years were like the pivotal years of development. And again, I'm not a psychologist or a doctor, so I really can't tell you. But they were very, very hard for me to go through what I went through. I remember 6th grade was kind of like me going to school and feeling like the oddball. Mind you that, you know, I came from a very poor, low-income family. So even though, you know, my mom always strived to get me new clothes, but sometimes, you know, it was like a struggle. I was like with old clothes and things like that. But eventually, you know, I ended up getting from an outlet store. My mom got from an outlet store some corduroys, and I remember going to school with some corduroys. And this is the time that when there was like the Jinko jeans were popular, or denim jeans, and I kept thinking to myself, like, it doesn't matter. I'm unique. I'm going to be the same way that I am, and I'm not going to change for anyone. You know, these were the conversations that I guess I was having with my higher self as a little kid, you know, that's like 12 or 13 years old. And for me, it wasn't about that. I wasn't raised to be materialistic, and I still don't feel like I am materialistic, even as an adult now that has had success. That yes, I have name brand things. Yes, I have a lot of that, but that doesn't mean a thing to me. If I didn't have that tomorrow, it wouldn't change who I am today. And that's why I'm talking about this and speaking about it on a very personal level with you guys, because a lot of you that know me as a personality or the figure don't really know me, I guess, as Ray, like Raymond, you know, in what I've actually gone through. But I'm gonna sit and tell you, you know, I got my tissues here in case I ball down, you know, ball out, because it is a point, you know, where even if you've done so much healing, it still hurts sometimes to revisit the past, but sometimes it's very needed. So 6th grade, it was very much different. Again, I didn't have any friends. It wasn't until 7th grade that I had this little boy. His name was John Paul. He was my actual friend, and for some reason or another, this was like an episode of Mean Girls. He decided one day that he was no longer going to be my friend. I don't know what was told, what rumors were spread or anything. And we used to sit at lunch together, we used to talk, and all of a sudden my little friend John Paul decided he didn't want to be my friend anymore and basically ghosted me, but without technology. This was like, you know, just abandonment completely. And I never went up to him and asked him or bothered, because I guess I was not that type of person that was very bold to speak. I was very shy, in fact, throughout my junior high years. And in 7th grade and specifically. And in 7th grade, a family friend had just passed away from bladder cancer. So it was a big ordeal for me to experience actually loss of a loved one, because I love that person almost like a grandpa, even though he wasn't my grandpa. And it was very devastational to go through that during the summer months before my 7th grade year. But I remember through 7th grade year, I had my friend John Paul at the very beginning, and then he just abandoned me and I didn't know why. Then I remember going in with my corduroy pants one day. It was no longer blue jeans like the other kids. I went in with some corduroys thinking that, you know, they were very comfortable, because, hey, corduroys are very comfortable. But I went into school and I got a lot of looks. Let's just say that. A lot of looks, a lot of gossip. But then it got into, like, when I went into the cafeteria, it was a whole different ballgame. And I don't know if a lot of you have ever, you know, remember back to your past or childhood and you've been bullied in the cafeteria. I feel like the lunchroom or the cafeteria is like the worst area, and I would actually dread going to the cafeteria every single day, because I would get snares, I would get looks, I would have people laughing at me, other kids, cliques of kids that were like in the National Honor Society, or that were very, you know, just popular kids that would sit together. And there I was, you know, Ray the loner that didn't really sit with anybody. And so it was very defining for me. I remember walking into the cafeteria and all these girls and guys were just together, and they were laughing at me and making fun of me because and they looked me up and down, but specifically at my pants. And they were like, "What's up with the corduroy pants?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, I was like, "What do you mean?" And I just walked off and ignored them. And for me, that was like a lot. There was times that I would go home and I would cry in the shower, because of the fact that I actually had endured, you know, a lot of things that children shouldn't have to endure. And I feel like a lot of this happens because these kids are products or byproducts of their own parents. And you can say, well, you know, there's a lot of TV, but back then when I was growing up in the early 90s, like, there wasn't a lot of the internet. Internet didn't exist until after, like, 1995. And it was very limited as to who had access to internet, and it was dial-up. And people didn't have cell phones back then, and if they did, they were either executives or very rich people. It was mainly pagers, but there was a lot of children that, you know, I feel like a lot of these kids that were my bullies that are probably looking at me today, I want you to know how much it affected me, but I want you to know that I do forgive you in my heart for whatever you did to me while I was in junior high or elementary or even high school. I do forgive you, and I believe in forgiving a person for whatever they did to another kid. And people will just say that are looking at this, well, they were just kids, they didn't know any better. But the fact of the matter is that we do have free will, and we know right and wrong. And a lot of those kids and those souls now, like, I see them, you know, some of them are working at McDonald's, some of them are working as a DoorDash delivery person. Some of those people that bullied me are just, one of my bullies is actually died from an overdose. So it's very sad, it's very tragic, and I always knew that I would have a point in time when I would, you know, grow up and be older like I am now at 37 years old and actually talk about this, because I feel like a lot of people my age maybe have not come out and talked about this, and they don't want to be judged or be seen as vulnerable, because society has taught us to be numb and not have any emotion. And then going back to my junior high year, junior high, 7th grade, that was like the worst year for me. I remember walking into the cafeteria, and one day I was like, you know, this was like after the corduroy incident. And one day I was like walking, and I was like, I'm gonna sit with the popular kids. These were a group of, you know, different type of ethnicities, you know, the white person, a black person, and a Mexican, you know, or Hispanic, Latino, whatever you want to call it. There was a group of kids, and I was like, I'm gonna go get my tray. They were sitting here on a table, and I said, I'm gonna just go ahead and get my tray, and I'm gonna sit down close to them, not like exactly close to them, but close. And I went and I sat down, and they all looked at me like I had the plague, and they picked up their trays and laughed and moved to another bench, because in the cafeterias back then, these were like long benches. They were not round tables, but like rectangular long benches, and then underneath it you could put like your feet, you know, and prop them up on that bar. But I remember that, and I remember feeling so, I don't even have the words today to even describe it. I felt like gross. I felt ugly, and I started taking on that blame, and I started really thinking, what is wrong with me? Like, why me? Why, you know, why did God? Because back then at the time I was in a I would go to an all-black Baptist church, and I was Baptist even though I was born Catholic, which really has nothing to do with this video. But I had the reason I'm talking about it is because this is all facets of what of who I am. A lot of people don't know, and so I was very close to God, and I still am, you know. But the religious thing, I always felt a very strong connection to God, and I kept saying to myself, you know, why are you allowing this? Like, this is so cruel. I don't deserve this. Like, no kid deserves to be treated this way. And I remember how that made me feel inside, and it made me feel sick. It made me feel horrible. It made me feel like, you know, I had no power and I was no one, and I was just like a tiny little person. And you know, time passed by, and that incident went away. And I remember then in 7th grade, we would go to PE, and we had the locker room, and we had to change. We had the wire baskets. You could put a lock, a combination lock, or, you know, whatever on there, but it was like a wire basket. You would put your clothes from the daytime, and then you would put, you know, your PE clothes, and you would leave your PE clothes. Some kids would take them home. But I remember one incident where I had my, you know, my PE shoes, and then I had my regular shoes, and I had left my shoes there, and it was after PE, and I was changing back to my regular school clothes, and I looked at one of my shoes, and somebody had put in a big 3-inch nail in one of my shoes, so that when I would put it in my shoe, I would probably like either step on it and hurt myself or get it stuck in my heel. And I just remember, like, I didn't report it or anything. I told my mom afterwards, you know, what had gone on. But that's the kind of things that I went through, and it got worse. Like, that's just the premise of everything that happened to me. I remember that my mom had bought me a brand new coat for the winter months, even though in South Texas we hardly have anything, but it was a lot cooler in 1996, 95, 96, somewhere around there. It was a lot cooler. And I remember walking down the hall, and somebody had a pen, and they just threw the ink on the back of my brand new coat and got it all over the coat. And it was like my mom had to wash it, scrub it, and get it out. But it was a horrible, horrible thing. I remember also there was this one guy that couldn't stand me, and he would always come behind the hall and just flick my ear. And I had had it to that point. You can only take so much, you know, as a human being. And I think that day I snapped, and I had my combination lock in my hand, and I was going to go after him. And sure enough, destiny had it. When one of the teachers saw me, exactly like she saw me right what I was doing, she thought that I was the bully, and I was the one that was actually, I was only trying to defend myself. I had to explain to her he had flicked my ear, you know, and this was something that was going on, and I told her. But he kept laughing and going on, and he was shorter than me and scrawny, and he had blue eyes, I remember, and he was just a bully, you know. They didn't care at all. And I remember then I had an experience with a teacher. She was Caucasian, and since I'm mixed, I was a lot darker. I didn't have blonde hair, didn't have my contacts on. Yes, I wear contacts. And so I was like very much melanated. I looked a lot different than what I look now. No, I have not bleached my skin. No, I haven't changed. I just don't go out in the sun as much. But I was a lot more melanated, and I looked a lot more mixed than what I had. I had thick hair, and kind of like a little afro. Like I have a pic on of this. Anyways, I remember going into the classroom, and every day I had gone into this. It was a reading teacher, and we all had chairs. You know, we always had desks. And that one day I was running a little bit late to my class, and I went in, and my chair wasn't there, and all the other kids' chairs were there. And I was like, where do I sit? She's like, sit on the floor. Now the floor was all tile. It was all cold. And this is coming from a teacher that's bullying the student. And I was like, I can't sit on the floor. I have bad allergies, upper respiratory issues. If I sit on the cold floor, I'm going to catch a cold. Well, she didn't care, and she said, just sit on the floor, you know, and it became a whole ordeal. And finally, it took me going to the principal and speaking to them and letting them know that I cannot go to that classroom, and why does everybody else have a chair and I didn't, you know. Finally, the next day, it was corrected, and I had my chair. But I don't know, like, this wasn't like a form of punishment, but more of like an isolation. I'm not sure to this point what that teacher was trying to prove, like what point. But she was a much older white lady, and me being mixed, you know, it wasn't an easy thing. And I remember asking myself as well, like, why are my teachers even like this, you know? Why am I getting bullied and treated like this? Like, I don't deserve it. And it was very hard. Like, that was like the most horrific time. And if I could go back to junior high, I wouldn't, for that reason, because of what I experienced. But I did draw a lot of forgiveness from those people that treated me like that, and they know who they are, and I'm pretty sure that they are watching my videos now, and they look at them, you know, from way back then. You know, they have seen my success or followed me, or they know about me, because I don't live like in a big city that has like 100 million population, you know. So I remember that, and then I had so many other things happen to me. I had someone spit on me. Yes, I have that as well. I remember like so much of that. I remember being pushed down the stairs. Luckily, I didn't fall. I had held on to the rails. And the list goes on and on and on. Like in PE, and people would pair up. I was always the last one to get paired, and I was always the one on field trips. When we would go on field trips, that I was made fun of by other kids in the class. And I remember this one time we went to, I think it was like San Antonio, I believe it was San Antonio, to Waterloo Park in San Antonio, Texas, and this was like a field trip. This was my 8th grade year, and I remember we went there, and I was walking, and they had like a bridge, and I was walking with the other children, but we were like in different groups, and these kids were like on the top part making fun of me, and I felt like isolated, like on a trip that you should actually have fun, you know. And I tried, like a lot of people that are looking at this would probably ask themselves or say, let me go ahead and cut this off and continue, because it's about to cut off. So I have a lot of people that are probably looking at this and saying, well, why didn't you make an attempt to be friends with kids and stuff? I did. I actually did. I would try to make conversations, but I would get ignored completely. And I don't know, like, I really don't know. I honestly believe on a spiritual level that a lot of these souls that are like this to kids, you know, even if it's online today, and my heart goes out to children and people today, like children and adults that are going through it, because I go through it now as an adult, and I go through this as an adult through YouTube, Instagram, you know, a lot of trolls and things like that, negative things, but I can handle it now as an adult, because I feel like what happened to me as a child, you know, it stayed with me, and I vowed myself to never be that person. That, you know, because sometimes when you're bullied, you become the bully. And it's very easy to become the bully and hurt other people. Luckily, I can say through life that I never went through that, and I never, what I mean I never went through that, I never became the bully, and I never bullied other kids or people as adults, because to me, there is something about that that is pain and hurt that I think a lot of these souls as children are going through in their lifetime. And it's trauma. Oh, I remember in elementary, that I didn't tell you this, but going back to my elementary, there was this girl, she was Hispanic, and I remember I was on the monkey bars, and I was swinging from the monkey bars, and I was like, I'm just swinging. She came from behind me, and she just pushed me, and I lost my grip and landed on my jaw, and I could have broken my whole jaw and my mouth completely, and probably lost all my baby teeth that I had at the time. I think I was like 6 years old, 7 years old. I think it was like first grade or kindergarten or first grade, but I remember that. And they didn't do anything to her. She didn't get suspended. It was like the teacher felt like it was an accident, and it wasn't an accident. It was perpetrated. It was, you know, intentional. And she laughed about it, you know, in the past, like, and I saw her in high school, and she never apologized to me, and she knows who she is, and I'm pretty sure that now, you know, a lot of these people are having their own negative karma that comes back to haunt them. And, you know, if you're going through it, what got me through a lot of the stuff that I was going through was listening to music. Music has always been an outlet for me, and I immersed myself and became the nerd. I became the person that was very studious and just immersed myself in literature and reading books. I found a lot of comfort from reading books, because back then we didn't have social media, we didn't have phones, you know, to the smartphones and all of that, or the computers. So I found a lot of comfort in music, listening to the radio or the Walkman. The Walkman, you remember the Walkman with the cassette players? And I would go to the on the weekends, my mom would take me sometimes to the record stores, and I would buy the CD singles of my favorite artists for like 99 cents or whatever, and pop it into the cassette. Give me a sec. Bless me. Sorry. Allergies. Tearing up. So I remember that, and that got me through so much of the stuff that I was going through on a very hard level. And I went through a very creative phase. Art got me through it as well. I loved art. I loved drawing. And, you know, when I was like in my high school years, I really didn't care about it anymore. Like, it really didn't bother me. I had one black girl, my soul sister. She was my friend. We've like lost touch already, like, but we're, you know, if I would reconnect with her today, I would still consider her like a best friend. It's been like 20 something years, but she was my high school friend, and she was a black girl, and she was very tall, very beautiful, like a model, and she was my best friend. And from there, you know, like, I worked half day my senior year. I would work half day and go to school half day. In the mornings I would go to school like from 7 to 11, and then from 11:30 or 12 I would be at work until 5, and then I'd go home and study and do my homework and whatnot. But you know, I feel like this all kind of shaped me as who I am as a person today. When I got into my work years, like working out there for other people, before I started more solidly on my spiritual path, I worked at the Social Security office temporarily. I worked at a home health agency. I worked at Hobby Lobby. I worked in for briefly for a doctor's office, and then I went to a call center, and then from the call center to a manufacturing facility as a scheduler. Excuse me. And then from there, doing what I'm doing now. And I remember throughout all of those jobs, you know, there was a couple of people that were always at my jobs that were at the places that I worked at that were co-workers or employees, and they always made comments about me because, you know, when I first started at a home health agency, I was the only male receptionist, and so a lot of I worked around a lot of ladies. Like, I didn't have any other men around me, and so I remember, like, they thought that I was very paranoid. There was just a lot of rumors. The lady that was training me didn't really like me at all, and it became like she felt very threatened because I had a college background, and I was going to college at the time, and it became a very isolated. So I even encountered bullying even in the workforce for being the only male receptionist and starting off, you know, at 19 years old being a receptionist and being a male. And then the ladies would talk about me, and I think it was one employer who made my life a living hell. And she was a much older white lady again, and I'm only throwing the terms out there just so that people can be awakened and know exactly like who were my bullies, so that they know if they're listening that you didn't break me, you didn't hurt me to the point that you thought you could destroy me. I am still me, and I'm rising, and I'm very proud of my success, and I'm very proud of who I am, and I want to thank you for opening my eyes to how I would never want to be, and how never to treat people, is what I would say to the person if I was standing in front of them. But I remember one day she pulled me across the hall, and she pulled me into a room, and she was like, you know, I have a lot of gay friends, and I want to know if you're gay. And I was like looking at this lady like, seriously? And I was like, it's none of your business if I am or if I'm not. It's none of your business. And so I never answered the question at all, and I just kept on. And then it became very very catty in the office, where a lot of the women that were in that place, you know, kind of ganged up on me, and it was like they started getting into my personal life, like making comments about my mother and other, you know, snide remarks and things like that. It just became a big boil room of just negativity, gossip, things that I would never partake in. And so, you know, I felt like, you know, in many ways so uncomfortable, not because there was it was a group of ladies and I was the only guy, but because of how these women were. You know, they didn't want a male. You would think that women are not prejudiced against males that are, you know, working in their environment, but they really, some women are, not all of them. Some women encourage having a male work with them, but these ladies didn't. And I feel it was because I was a lot tougher, and I didn't put up with shit in that job, even though I needed it, because I guess I had endured so much as you know, as a teenager and a child growing up being bullied, that I took a lot of these things with me, and it made me much stronger as an individual to be able to confront bullies and let them know that it's not acceptable and it's not okay to treat someone like a bully. And I think, like, in today's society, that it has become the norm for a lot of people sitting behind a PC thinking that it cannot be tracked, that their IP address can't be tracked, or that they cannot be found from bullying other people. You know, it is illegal in many states to bully someone else, and I think, and I hope that the government comes down with stricter laws regarding online bullying, because there's a lot of kids that I could have been one of those kids that committed suicide. I never was suicidal, and I'm so thankful that I had a lot of faith in God, and I had my mom, who was an amazing woman that I always came to with my problems, and I got, you know, kind of like positive out of it. But it's very hard. There's a lot of kids that get bullied for being different or for being, you know, unique, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they get bullied for being unique, and they end up committing suicide, hanging themselves, shooting themselves. You know, there's just so many cases, and we're losing, like right now, as you're looking at this video, there is some child out there that is being bullied, either cyber bullied or being bullied by somebody else, and they're getting bullied, and they're probably having suicidal thoughts, or we've lost a child just in this minute that you're listening to this video to suicide. So I know that this is like the day before Easter, and I really didn't expect to film this, but like I said, I'm all about transparency on my channel, and I wanted to talk about things that hold very dear to my heart, and that I want people out there that are listening, that my viewers, my rays of light, to know your child does not have to take the bullying, that parents need to be more responsible and stop making excuses for their children being shitty, because the fact of the matter is that even if you think, oh, my baby could never do this, they could never be the bully or blah blah blah, just because your child is one way in front of you does not mean that you know who your child is behind your back or in school. A lot of times your children will have multiple personalities or will act out differently than when they're in front of their parents, because they know their parents wouldn't tolerate that. And if you are a parent that has smaller children and you are just throwing F-bombs and cussing and being violent and angry, I ask you to please get some help, get some counseling, get some therapy, and keep that away from your children, because your children are very perceptive, and they know exactly what's going on in their household, and then they see mom do it, and then they think, or dad do it, and they think it's okay for them to do that to other children in school and hurt them. And then you're very defensive. Well, my child could never do this and blah blah blah. But the fact of the matter is that you really never knew who your child was. And then it becomes a case where these children are never held accountable for their actions, and they're never reprimanded, and they become citizens of society, and they become criminals. They become very violent. Domestic violence, you know, is something that we see with a lot of these little boys that grow up into young men, and they start beating on their wives or their girlfriends and doing all these things that they actually endured. If you have been sexually abused, if you have been bullied like I have, talk to someone. Talk to your counselor, your school counselor. If you can't, talk to your parents first. Talk to your parents if you can. Seek some help. Know that you're not alone if you are a victim of bullying, and if you have any suicidal thoughts, talk to an adult. Talk to somebody that you can trust. You're never alone in the world. And I think that you know, if you're going through any kind of bullying, know that it's not you. Nothing is wrong with you. You're perfect as who you are. And that's what I would tell myself, you know, now, if I was to go back in time as young Ray, I would tell myself, you know, you are beautiful. I love you unconditionally, and thank you so much for being strong and knowing your worth. And that's who I am today. I am a very strong person, and I know a lot of people will not like this video. A lot of people will be very uncomfortable watching this video, but I think that it was time for me to kind of speak out and to my bullies and confront them, even if it is from a camera and from my YouTube channel. You know, if they happen to watch this, I want them to know that I forgive them, and I hope that they're, you know, that they are being good parents to their children, so that their children don't do the same things that they did to me. And that, you know, that everybody deserves a second chance, and to not be angry with themselves as they were just children and products of probably their own parents, and they never really put two and two together, how much impact their parents have in their lives or on their lives, you know. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about on today's video, about confronting my bullies and my bullying experiences and the depth and the pain that I went through. And there's so much more that I could say, but you know, I don't want to draw this out into like a 2-hour series or video. But I feel so liberated. I feel free, and I feel happier than ever to talk about this in front of the camera and be some kind of role model for people that are watching, that if you've gone through bullying, you know, as a child, and now you're an adult, maybe you're my age, get some counseling, get some help, talk about it, write down, you know, keep a journal and journal about it, because I think it's so important that you get healing, that we all get healing. I've worked with Reiki masters, I've worked with counselors, and so I've actually gotten a lot of, my best friend Pamela is a counselor. She is a therapist. So like, you know, I have that in my life right now, and I feel like it's so good to go through that. And I feel like sometimes we don't realize, like, how it shapes us in the bullying. You know, it does carry into adulthood. And even in adulthood, when you are in relationships and you've been a product of bullying, you don't want to open up as much to love, or you may have codependencies when you are loved because you never experienced that as a child. You didn't feel like you were loved by other people. And so love starts within yourself, and it's the beginning of the journey. And if you can love yourself unconditionally, you will naturally and organically draw those people to your life that are not worried about your looks, your weight, your superficial, you know, the superficiality of you know, the fakeness that is out there. They will only care about who you are, your soul, and your heart. And so just know that you are loved. So I love you so much, my rays of light, and all of you that are viewing this for the very first time. Thank you so much for being on with me on this journey, and watching my videos and listening to what I have to say. I love you so much. I hope you have an amazing Easter. Blessings and love and light. Until next time. Bye.